Um, he who corrects a scoffer gets himself abused, and he who reproves the wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight.
You want me to
Okay.
go? Do you want me to start?
Sorry, I was just drinking water.
Okay.
Um, you can start, or we could just like discuss it because I think we did a good job at laying down the context in week 7.
Okay.
Um, what like what thoughts do you have on what stuck out to me was that people who, I mean, I read this and I think people who think that they're holy are not holy because they don't want to hear critique, and then people that are holy don't think that they're holy because they do want to hear critique. Um, that's
Hmm.
very plain. Um, but what thoughts do you have on this?
Um, so when you sent this to me, it was the in the liturgical calendar, it was the week of fraternal correction. And so it the readings that accompanied it, um, this was not in that week, but the Bible readings at Mass were Ezekiel. And so there's a prophet who, in when Ezekiel's speaking about something very similar, which is correction as a theme,
Hmm.
um, he ends up saying you have to, and
Yeah.
he ends up saying that you actually take on the culpability of your brother when you don't correct. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
um, so it was interesting to me because when you sent this, it it says to be discerning when you correct based on the person you are correcting, and then Ezekiel just didn't have any of that discernment. And
Mm.
so, what struck me was the comment I made earlier about who is Solomon talking to, and if
Hmm.
we're placing this in the courtyard rather than the
Yeah.
temple, I
Hmm.
think I think you can kind of say maybe Ezekiel is speaking in the temple and Solomon is speaking in the courtyard to the different
Yeah. More
people.
general in a way.
Yeah, and so if we kind of follow that path of wisdom to where the gospel, if we treat it like a holy of holies area, which
Hmm.
is which we'll get to in a little bit, but I started seeing kind of a physical progression of comments that at least appeared to me contradictory, but when I considered audience, it felt coherent.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
And
Yeah. That makes
so
sense.
when I think of what wisdom is, um, wisdom literature is often a description of the way the world works. Um,
Hmm.
and it's a way to navigate the world. So, like in that week 7 reading, it is here is directions on how to live, and here is a prescription against providing correction to unwise people. And that makes a lot of sense because if you look at any of the prophets, none of them wanted to provide correction. Like every prophet tried, well, I don't know that's true, but a lot of prophets tried to avoid the call.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Isaiah
I
talks
mean,
about how things burned inside, and they
yeah.
they're aware of the cost of it.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at, was it Jeremiah? Like, he got like, I can't remember what prophet it was, but he got like sawed in half because he was preaching this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't seem particularly appealing to me to get
Right.
sawed
And
in half
so,
because I'm preaching wisdom.
right. And so I feel like Solomon is explaining why things will happen
Yeah.
and why those things happen, and
Hmm.
is able to give wise counsel on it. So that was my first reaction: is,
Yeah.
man, this doesn't make sense. But then I think it begs the question: well, what, let's travel into the temple and think, why do we hear a prophet now saying you kind of can't get away from it?
Yeah.
And what does that mean? So, how would you
My take
reconcile?
on my uh I guess thoughts on this are basically like I think today um people are either good or they're bad in a way, if that makes sense. It's no like it's not it's black or white. It's
Mm-hmm.
not as much there's spectrum and like a color gradient. It's more of like you're either a good person or you're a bad person. And I think
Yeah.
that today this is the way we could apply this today is I think that um the wise men today are very the way it's like what how we look at a wise man. And I think that the wise man in the passage is very like he's searching how to become better. Um and we just don't see that today. Our leaders think that they are perfect in a way. And I think that the what this is trying to point out is that a true leader is and a true wise man is somebody who is always looking for ways to improve his virtues and to how to like dull his vices. And I think that often today we just get stuck in this trap of like, well, I mean, you're either a good person or you're a bad person. But really, like
Mm-hmm.
a wise man is almost like accepting that you have fault and then
Mm-hmm.
continuing to grow even though you are not going to be perfect. And I think that what I see here is the scoffer doesn't want to be corrected because he thinks from what I can understand is he reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Like the scoffer is going to fight against you in being corrected um because he thinks he's perfect, whereas the wise man will welcome you and he'll be like, yes, what ways can I grow more in the way of the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think
Well, I think
that,
there's a later proverb that'll say even the wise man falls down. Maybe it's even the just man falls down 7 times a day, or maybe
mhm,
it's the wise man. Um, but yeah, I
yeah,
think Proverbs has a realistic impression of
hmm,
goodness as something that is striven for rather than attained.
yeah, yeah. And I think that it's the people that think that it's like you have it or you don't have it. And I think that that's part of the struggle in today's society. It's like you're either a good person or you're not a good person. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, I mean, I'm being a little repetitive here, but I do think that if we can convince ourselves that we are not perfect, but there are ways that we can work every day to becoming slightly better, to be becoming more like God. Like, what ways can you forgive a little bit better? What ways can you work a little bit harder on your virtues? Like, how can you accept you are human and then grow? Not as much accept, not think of yourself as a God in a way. And
Uh-huh.
that's what I think is being stressed in this. It's like don't be so that you can't accept like a critique. Like understand that yes, you are human. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna mess up 100 times a day, but don't let that stop you from trying to mess up 99 times the next day. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's a diagnostic
Mm,
for self-evaluation when critique happens.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you
I
can say,
like that.
okay, how do I feel? And then what does that mean about me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which, if wisdom is a gift that, in a sense, we learn, so it's not like it's implanted, but it's eventually something that we become um,
Mm-hmm.
closer to. There, my impression is the internal diagnostic
Mm-hmm.
is useful because it reframes the stuff suffering that critique causes.
Yeah.
So the problem is that you resist critique because critique is painful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's natural to avoid pain. And so if wisdom is something we need but won't naturally do,
Mm-hmm.
we need to assume that we are naturally foolish or unwise, or in we start from the wrong point in this
Mm-hmm.
analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we use this and remind ourselves when it happens, then we're given a chance to not feel only the hurt, but to interpret hurt as sanctifying or
Yeah.
wisdom growing.
I think it's like almost understand that you're on a journey. Understand that like you're going to be stronger on day 100 than you are on day one. So let's
Mhm.
start on day one and then let's get to day 100. On day
Mhm.
100, your virtues are going to be a lot stronger than they are on day one. And I think that
Mhm.
this is like, it's, I mean, if you want to be a wise person, like starting on day one is going to be miserable. Starting on day two is going to be a little bit better. Day three, a little bit better. And I
Mhm.
think that continuing like every day just to dive into this and dive into what it means to be a good what it means to be a good Christian and a good person. It's like think about ways every day that you can do a little bit better than the last, and don't think of it like I am good on day one. How can I not be bad on day two? Um,
Mhm.
and I think that this is no, accept that you're not perfect on day one and accept that on day 100, God is going to work through you to become better and better and better until you reach heaven.
So that to me fits with that word son in the week 7 reading,
Hmm.
which is implying the posture
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
reader.
yeah.
And so
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
the son is not the father. The son is
Hmm.
receiving something from the father that's precious.
Yeah, we're still
And
growing up.
yeah, and maybe we'll get to a point to deliver wisdom elsewhere, but initially you are receiving it.
Hmm.
I'll I'll share a personal story on this one. Was that Mon and I um, practice a morning. It's called a chapter, so it's a structured prayer and reading.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what it opens with is a pleading for mercy, for divine mercy, and
Hmm.
then we have to apologize to each other for something we've done that's inconsiderate. And
Yeah,
then we acknowledge something that's wonderful about the other person. So it
it's a good
requires us.
practice.
Yeah, so it requires it. And I'll say we're maybe a year and a half into it. In the early morning, I still get a ugh, feeling before I have to say it. Like it's still
Yeah,
something you muster up,
yeah,
um, and you
yeah.
have
I
to
mean,
rise to it.
it's almost like apologizing for me. It's like I mean, I've apologized thousands of times, but it's just as hard the 1,001st time as it is the first time.
Yeah,
I still hate doing it. Um,
yeah,
and I think that the fact that it's like, and I don't mean to paint myself as a saint or anything, but it's just the words I didn't think about this well. It's let's get to, let's apologize 10,000 times and then still understand that we're going to have to apologize 100,000 more times. And I think that a lot of it
exactly.
is accept that you're not gonna get to the end of being perfect. And I think that the wise man understands that and the scoffer does not.
Yeah,
And I
I like
think
that a
that
lot.
the scoffer will always be fighting against you to get to apologizing 100 times. Like he's like,
Yeah,
there's no way I'm gonna affect somebody that bad where I have to apologize 100 times. Whereas the wise man's gonna be like, no, I deserve to apologize just as much this time as I did 100,000 times ago.
yeah,
Um, and I think that that's how we should try to live each day. I deserve what I deserve to try my best today as much as I did 3 years ago, as much as I did 4 years ago. It's not like I'm any better today than I was 4 years ago. My virtues might be stronger, but today is a new day and I must do my best today, if that makes sense. And that's what I really take away from this.
Uh-huh. Um, yeah, I think that's great. I think what I've experienced too is when Mon and I have to do it every day, we say it in the morning, and when something happens in the day, there's a triggering effect of I'm gonna have to apologize for this,
Yeah.
or I just better do it right now. So it the frequency of it
Mm-hmm.
has forced us to have a lot of hard conversations every day, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'll say that like our way of talking to each other is totally different, and what ends up happening is that you end up building a sense of trust between each other, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a trust that the other person will do the right thing but is trying to do the right thing. And so when
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can trust their effort, the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue is easier.
Yeah.
um so
It's
that's
it's 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 not like this person is a perfect person. It's this person is a good person who's trying to be perfect.
yeah.
Um,
um well, let me add the kind of gospel dynamic that I was thinking
yeah.
to go with the physical progression. So
Week nine is
okay,
coming in strong. I'm just telling you.
what's coming in strong?
Week nine is going to be really good.
Good. Okay. So um I want to Solomon speaking in the courtyard, kind of
Mm-hmm.
welcoming people to
Mm-hmm.
progress to the temple. And that liturgical reading, um, the gospel reading for that week that you sent this over to me,
Mm-hmm.
was Christ's word. So I'll put that in the Holy of Holies. So that's where we have direct contact with God. And in that week, Christ tells us how to do correction.
Mm-hmm.
And what he ends up saying is you do it privately, and then you do it with a few people, and then you do it with your whole community, and then you progress outside of that. So it actually puts it in reverse. So you're walking in from a private, intimate moment into increasingly public, which
Yeah. Yeah.
imagine walking out of the temple from the holies of holy holies.
Yeah.
And so correction in a way gets louder the further out um, you're from intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
um, what I appreciated about that, so kind of putting all of these together. So if Solomon is saying, "Hey, you're going to get whacked," and Ezekiel says, "But you have to," and then Christ says, "Do it prudently and thoughtfully and considerately,
Mm-hmm.
but without compromise."
Yeah.
It it was very meaningful to me. So um, it felt like the blend of grace and justice in the sweetness and care for what someone is. And what also I feel like came to me more in prayer around that was to recall any times that we've required correction, and what does that correction experience tend to be like.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we remember how much patience we've demanded of God or others,
Mm-hmm.
so like my wife and I were, married more than a decade. We've only been doing this, and I'll say I don't know that any other thing we've done has aided our marriage like this.
Yeah.
Um, and so we've gone through these phases where we've had to day over day address the long-standing causes of pain that we give each other.
Mm.
Um, so you kind of dig deeper and deeper, realizing how difficult it will be for the guilty party to correct their way.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up to me explaining Christ's progressively patient yet demanding recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and pause